Hello, it's me. Welcome to my streams, my little spudlings. So I think this is more in line with what you guys were saying, more of like torture, punishments. I already watched like half of this, and this one is a little morbid. So to those who are not good with that kind of stuff, I personally quite enjoy it. If you don't like morbid stuff, maybe don't watch it with me.
Let's go. Number 10, the Rat Dungeon. If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period,
thank
you
God
would
we
have
don't live in
definitely
that
heard
time.
about the Rat
Bye.
Dungeon. Since this punishment struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness. But here's the thing, the dungeon was connected to the nearby river and just below the river's waterline, so that when the water levels rose, all the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. This would of course lead the hungry and angry rats towards the entrance of the dungeon, where they would then come face to face with the prisoner. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything, and all he would hear were the soft scurries of the rats' feet entering the dungeon. And in a matter of minutes, these soft noises were in the hundreds and all around him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending himself. Now he might be able to shake the rats
Maybe
off.
this is the origin of the crazy. Crazy? I was crazy once. They locked me in the room. A room full of rats. And they ate me. Yum, yum,
for
yum,
a few hours, but eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion. And while he slept, the rats would continue to take bites
ASMR
from
Nightmare
his flesh.
Edition.
Eventually,
Oh,
when he
look
would
at
wake
him.
up,
Yum,
he would
yum.
discover
I
hundreds of
love
bites
being
throughout
breakfast.
his entire body. But it didn't
Ooh,
stop there.
that image is like, ooh. Let's watch this.
The prisoner was left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime.
Damn,
but
that's
towards
so...
the end of the medieval period,
Hi-ya-ya.
this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution, where prisoners would just be thrown in the dungeon and forgotten about. Number 9.
That's so fucked up. Like, I get that these were prisoners, but imagine if you were actually an innocent person that got convicted wrongly. Imagine getting eaten by a rat. By rats. Rats.
The rack.
We all know this one. Are you insecure about your height, baby boy? Don't worry, I have the perfect device for you. Introducing the Racking Tollinator. Yes!
The device looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin.
Stretchy.
You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack,
Trust me, I'm a chiropractor. I can pop
feet and
your
wrist
back
tied
for
to
you.
a ratchet pulley system, where 2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes.
Bro, did
and
you
locking
see his
them in
face?
place
Bro.
system,
Look at his
where 2 legal on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet
Look at him. It's like hee bondage.
pulley system, where 2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows. Sometimes it would work and the prisoners would be let go,
Yeah,
while
this
other times
isn't very kid friendly, is it?
be tortured even more for lying. When the whole ordeal was over, prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed.
Wait, I have a question. If you dislocate all your joints, can you reconnect them? Need surgery to reset their joint. Oh, cool. That's nice.
That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl
Yes, but taller. Yes, but taller.
named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated. She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the stake. All this because she read and memorized scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women, which were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture. You see, during this time period, if you followed any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody, including your own husband. which was the person that turned her in.
This
Number 8,
motherfucker. How dare that guy. I actually really admire her because they tortured the shit out of her. And she was like, I'm not gonna tell on my friends. God, I think I would have spilled in like 10 seconds. I would have been like, ow, okay. I'm sorry. I mean, have you seen me play horror games?
This brutal punishment was carried out at sea on sailors who would steal or be violent towards others and would usually result in death. Keel hauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with a rope, then looped around the entire circumference of the ship before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard while the group of men on board pulled on the rope to slowly drag him around the outside of the ship, including over the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it, since they were dead before they ever reached it. Kinda just depends on how hard the guys on the rope feel like working that day. Not only would the sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the outside of the ship. But if by some miracle a sailor actually happens to make it all the way around the ship without dying, one of 3 things will happen. 1, he would be sent for round 2 and for sure be dead by then.
Round 2? I'm not surviving round 2 in several ways. You just lack stamina. Ha ha ha. He didn't even get a pee break. He can pee in the ocean while he's getting dragged. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has peed in the ocean, right? I wouldn't survive a single day if I was born during those times. Me too. I would not survive. I'll just be a good person. I'm a good girl. I'm sorry.
Freed and allowed back on the ship, where he would then slowly die to infections. Or 3, live the rest of his life single and being made fun of since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe. Number 7, crushed by elephants. Now we are getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was most recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really not that long ago if you really think about it. Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of these. What type of crimes would you have to commit to be crushed by an elephant, you might ask? Well, apparently if you failed to pay your taxes,
step on me,
that
elephant
was good
mommy.
enough. And of course, stealing or being an enemy soldier was also a great way to become a tortilla. But the most disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal Emperor of India ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and needed some entertainment. The guy who—
See, I told you, boredom causes violence. A man is bored, elephants get involved. People get stepped on. He'd watch Husher stream when he gets bored instead. Exactly. Good suggestion. Let's hope Husher never gets bored outside of streaming. It's okay. I'm a good person. Why would you think I'd ever hurt anyone? Oh my god. You're so silly.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
Oh my gosh.
pay his taxes, crushed. The man who stole an apple from the local market, crushed. The little orphan who jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man who murdered his neighbor and added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright. Apparently he makes a damn good soup. There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same. There's always a guy on top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant. Now be impressed. The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate. Here, the criminals would have their arms tied behind their back and their heads placed on a pedestal, where it was then crushed like a grape by the elephant's foot. Now, the second method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go. But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm, so the elephant then has to make a U-turn and try again and again and again. The final and worst way is when a highly trained elephant
Did you see that? He stepped on his poor guy.
They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusks until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso. This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the 4th Mughal love to take, and made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone. Except for the 4th Mughal. He loved it.
Oh
Number
god,
6,
he's insane. Oh my god, what a frame to stop in. Cover it, not for the children. The children. I can't even cover it. Thank you, thank you.
Let your kids watch it.
Oh god, that was terrifying.
Probably one of the grossest and most cruel forms of punishment on the list. This has been used by a few countries throughout history, but was
I
most
was
recently
drinking
used in
water,
Egypt in the
Mappa.
17th century. Usually against criminals that were highway robbers, grave thieves, or
That's what I
anyone who
call
would try and start a rebellion.
penetration.
This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door.
Oh
and as soon
God,
as that
oh
incision
no.
was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop
Haha,
the
lube.
blood. They would then thrust in a long wooden
Oh
stick.
my god, look at that face.
That's suspicious.
Look at that face. I could take it. No, you can't. You dumb fuck. No, you can't. You lying liar.
That was the width of a man's arm, which was sharply
Oh,
tapered
dear.
on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet.
It's not even fisting. It's arming at this point. Get it? Arming?
And once the stake has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a busy road, like a Halloween
Censor
decoration,
it.
to remind everyone that this is what happens when you break
it's
the law.
horrible.
They will be left there for the entire day and removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You
Another
see, on
version?
some
Wow, people are just so creative, aren't they?
occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just deep enough to keep them in place, but
my
not too
God.
deep that it would cause immediate death. They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further. They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help, until eventually succumbing to their wounds.
Wow, humans are so creative.
Thank you, Agent K. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
Oh god, thank you. I needed that.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
Well, there we go. Ha ha ha.
Pena culé is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was, just a lot more terrifying and cruel. This was an
Biggest
exclusive
anal
punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members. This was first
You're finally awake.
seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the
This is
Germans in
actually
the
really weird to me. Like, is this really torturous? Like,
18th century.
How
This all
torturous is
begins
this?
with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag. But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil family murderer doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then
whole
sewn shut,
gang.
creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no, this is just the beginning. Because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean.
Oh, wow.
But don't worry, later on, these murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where they can perform the act of being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers. You know, at least they had the option. Number 4.
it's rats time again. Why is it always the rats?
The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568 during the 80 Years' War. A Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach, chest, face, or groin. Then the back of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go into a full-on panic, trying to escape
Oh my god,
from
he
the
pooped.
heat, and its only
Look,
way
it's
out
a rat poop. Dear Derek is a sick name. Imagine moaning that night.
was to burrow into the human.
Oh,
Once inside,
Jesus.
it would continue to chew
Ooh.
and tear apart whatever
no.
was in its way, desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner. But the second
Oh,
method was
fuck.
much worse and was highly secretive since it was used
But like, that rat though, amazing. Amazing fortitude to even like dig himself out of that. That's crazy.
Under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976 through 1983. They called it the rectoscope.
Rectoscope.
And I'm sure you have already figured out where this is going. Yes,
the butt.
it's exactly what you think. They would place a tube
Oh
on the prisoner's back.
Why is it always the butt? Why is it always the butt? Why? Why are humans obsessed with butts?
Door, then insert a rat inside of the tube.
No!
The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they actually expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on. Eventually,
That's oh my god, imagine answering questions with shit happening down there. Harder, Mickey! Oh, that's so cursed! No! I don't want to do this anymore!
nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge. Number 3, gibbeting. The last known use—
Harder Mickey is so— it's not just wild, it's actually cursed. That's the oh god, please.
was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan. This all came to light in 1921 when the National Geographic published this image in their magazine. This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching Boston. Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of punishment so much. In England, this was used on traitors, murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort. And over 134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this. It was an all-steel cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move. They were then hung 30 feet or more off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But I can only assume
Skibbity. It's skibbity.
this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with the dying man begging you for a sip.
Over here!
But the annoyance and torture of the public didn't stop there, because after the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end, with the locals complaining that the smell of death was so pungent that they couldn't even sleep at night. There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years before a government official would finally remember to clean it out. Number 2.
That's so insane. Wait, so people just like get left there to starve? Look at this nice cozy cage. Now you're stuck there forever until you die, kind of thing? Gosh, morbid.
Scaphism. This was a form of—
oh, this one's horrible.
punishment that was used by the ancient Persian Empire on anyone that would be convicted of murder. First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water.
What if you're short? Do you get a smaller boat?
Were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full. They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well. After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle. He gets
a massage before his send-off. Haha, massage me with milk and honey.
The lake, where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun.
But
the sun would soon—
I hate the sun.
—become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes a person to get extreme diarrhea, which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs—
oh my god. Okay, so if you ever need your, ever feeling constipated, eat milk and honey. That's what we learned in this video.
bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals live near the lake. After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better. No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal of milk and honey and an additional lathering. This would be done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible. It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door. They were probably trying to get a head start on their next meal.
Why is it always the butthole? The rats got no chill. That's why they use rats, because the rats ain't got no chill. Rats are like, hey, you want me to kill this guy for you? Sure, just give me the food, bro.
Great detail about one of these incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms of punishment, since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight. He wrote about a man who survived for an entire 17 days before he finally died from his wounds. Apparently, the man spent his last few days with his entire face completely covered with wasps, and his flesh rotting away filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth. Number 1.
I'm just gonna kill myself at that point. Goodbye, world. I'm sorry.
The oubliette. Oubliette simply means to forget.
That is so horrible. I'm gonna hurl.
In French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower, which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position for days on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick.
Is it gonna be
inside of
rats
Warwick
again?
Castle.
So
Here-
basically, rats is the main character for torturing. The main character of this video are rats and butts, apparently.
Deep underground in the castle's dungeons is a very small and narrow cell, completely made of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside of the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies. The prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now,
That's actually better than the other one. Like, I'd rather die sooner than like be forced and tortured again and again. Like, oh, just let me die, bro.
of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most of the time there would already be a rotting corpse inside of the cell to keep the new prisoner company.
I was about to say, hey, buddy. Ooh, guess I'm not alone down here.
Previous occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate, but that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons
It's
are completely
always
infested
rats.
with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh. But wait,
It's always the rats, bro. At this point, you know, rats, main character of this fucking video.
there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not hundreds, of human remains inside of it, as proof that they were hardly ever cleaned. Like in Leap Castle of Ireland, where in 1900 during the castle's renovation,
God.
a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel. This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette, and what the worker found inside shocked him, since it was filled with so many skeletons that they needed multiple cartloads to clear it all out. But just when you think this section is over, it just keeps on giving.
Okay, I'll pause the video for you. But Jesus, it's giving rats! Rats and rats and rats. You know what they needed back then? I would smuggle in a fucking cat. I'd smuggle in 2 cats. Maybe even 4. And I'd be like, release the cats! That's why being a cat lady was a smart idea. Rats will kill cats in high numbers. I'll just raise more cats then! My cat runs away from cats. My cat runs away from rats. My cat loves rats. I mean, she likes chasing shit. She loves chasing lizards, rats, anything that looks small and moving. I guess she's like, no, 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 no.
Most women were called witches and burned at the stake since cats got rid of the rats, and the women never got sick from them.
Oh. Cats. Cats are the answer.
Wow. But just when you think this section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and kept alive for years and years on end, surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as humanly possible. These cells were sometimes even placed on ground level so they can hear the voices and laughter of the people outside, an experience that they will never get again in this lifetime.
Wow, that is so insane. It's not just physical torture, it's psychological torture. It's like here's the happiness you will never experience, because you are human trash.
Arigatou gozaimasu!
Anyways, well, that was a trip.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, that escalated quickly.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Yep, it really got out of hand. You know what? Let's just look at happy things now. I think we're done with the gory
Behind!